think and feel as though people have called me here to electrocute me, judge me, put me in jail, or kill me, electrocute me because of some of the sins I've been in.
Is this a new feeling for you?
The main thing is don't get excited, but the thing is it's not a new feeling, no. I'm scared of people.
It must be very frightening for you, though. You feel like you're about to get killed.
I'm so scared I can tell you that picture's got a headache.
Can you tell me more about that? The picture has a headache? Could you?
You want to know?
Yes, I do.
Okay, when a sperm and an egg go together to make a baby, only one sperm goes up in the egg. And when they touch, there's 2 contact points that touch before any other 2. And then it's carried up into the egg. And when they fuse, it's like nuclear fusion, except it's human fusion. There's a mass loss of the proton. One heat abstraction goes up in the electron, spins around, comes back down into the proton to form the mind, and the mind can be reduced to 1 atom.
Jerry, in one patient at one time, shows almost every one of the major features of schizophrenia. His thinking is disorganized. The thoughts are loosely connected. He has formed delusional ideas. Some of those delusions are grandiose. Some of them are paranoid. He has disturbances in his mood. His mood is, in some cases, almost absent, and in other cases is totally inappropriate. And his behavior is disordered. It's unusual. He has mannerisms that are inexplicable. He has purposeless, aimless behavior around the ward. He's a textbook case. He combines all those things in one person.
At this point, what would you like us to do for you?
I'd like you to get me off of cigarettes, get me dried out, cleaned up, so I can go home and get a job in a bakery and go to medical school.
Like most severe schizophrenics, Jerry thinks he hears voices.
The voices that Jerry hears tend to be critical ones. They are male voices which tend to accuse him of past crimes. One of the problems that a patient with schizophrenia has is being overwhelmed by their sexual and their aggressive urges. Jerry's voices may at times say, "You raped that woman." In a case where he may have just seen a woman on the street, the voices will accuse him of assaulting her. One of the things that worries me about Jerry and about many patients is at times his voices tell him to do things. In just the short time he's been in this program, the voices at times have told him that he's got to leave because we're going to hurt him. So obviously they say things that greatly distress him, that scare him.
I guess the way I think of schizophrenia is that schizophrenia is an illness. It's a total picture. It's not like a peculiarity of behavior. It's not as if somebody has a sort of idiosyncrasy or has some peculiar way of doing things or thinking things. Schizophrenia is an involvement of a person in illness. There is abnormalities of behavior. There are abnormalities of thinking. There are abnormalities of feeling. There are abnormalities of the way people move across a room. There are peculiarities in what people perceive. There seems to be a very global impairment of what we think of as the highest psychological functions, the most intricate, sophisticated, complex psychological functions that people have.
Schizophrenia is an ugly illness. Though its exact definition varies from country to country, it occurs everywhere. Doctors at St. Elizabeth's have been trying to cure the disease for over 100 years, and they have to confront the most difficult cases of all.
In order to understand the kinds of patients that we have on this ward, you've got to remember that schizophrenia breaks down into the rule of thirds, we say. A third of the people who get the disease will get well and not get sick again. A third will get sick off and on and spend some time in the hospital, but a lot of time out of the hospital. The third, the real chronic schizophrenics, are the people that make up this ward. Are you going to be going home this weekend? You are. Chronic schizophrenics, when they've had the disease for more than a few years, almost certainly have some brain damage from the disease. It's sad because you have people who looked normal for the first 15, 17, 20 years of their life, and then you have this devastating illness, so that there is this disconnect between the way they are early in life and then the way many of them have to spend the rest of their lives. David, did you go to the Green Door today?
I didn't make it down there. I took 2 buses, but I was way off my schedule.
So that you didn't actually go there even though you were supposed to go there?
I didn't make it down there. You know, I got lost on the bus. I couldn't find the general direction of the area.
But other days you've been able to get
That's
there,
when I was
okay?
with Ray, and we got up together.
So the others did not come back with you? You came
No,
back
sir.
by yourself?
Yes.
You didn't actually get there today?
I didn't actually all the way get there. I passed by the area, but I didn't recognize it.
Okay. But you passed by the area?
Yes, I'm sure we did, but I didn't recognize it. I couldn't figure it out.
The pain of Jerry Smith's illness is projected onto his family. For his mother, the strain of caring for him has become intolerable. Jerry was admitted to St. Elizabeth's voluntarily, but his voices are telling him he should leave.
Dr. Bigelow, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Smith.
Smith, nice to see you.
Dr. Bigelow's the
Please come in
clinical
and sit down.
director.
Will he now agree to stay without being forcibly committed?
Well, thank you for coming down.
Dr. Bigelow,
Good morning. How are you?
about to get my teeth knocked out, I feel like. Because I'm nagging people, I'm playing a game with my psychological pain, but it exists.
I know it does, Jerry. That's why you're here, isn't it? To see if we can help you with it.
Jerry, I think the big question today is if you stay. And when you and I met with Dr. Bigelow on Friday, that wasn't very certain, and that's the whole reason that your mother flew out here.
I will stay if my mom stays.
Well, I told you before that I can't stay continuously.
Well,
I
how
have-
does that work?
We can come down maybe once every 6 weeks and stay a week, but I can't.
See what I'm doing right now. I understand what I'm doing. I've got you one down and I'm not gonna let you up. And that's a game, that just gets you mad.
Truly, deep down, he knows that this is the last chance he's got of having anything and being able to control anything that he wants or tries to do.
Yeah, I can
And he
believe
knows
in
that if he
instant
turns
doubt.
his back on it, that he's had it.
I hate you. Dr. Petrelli in Detroit looked at my transcripts and he started going like this. Gerald, just what could you have done if anything had ever went right for you? Been my boss? Every time in school that I was going to do something, I would raise my hand and a colored kid would stab me in the back of the neck. What is your explanation for that, God? That's what you're afraid to say. What is your explanation for that? Because you can't say it.
My explanation is that you feel that whatever decision you make, you're going to lose here. And maybe that's why it's so hard for you to make that decision.
My dad told me to stay here. I will stay if my mother will stay. There's no pressing job for her. She can have my Social Security check to live on while she's here.
Is that possible, Mrs. Smith?
I told him that we could come down once a month maybe and
You're going to
stay
get
a
me
week.
not scared, so I'm not scared. Well, this dude's playing boogie-woogie with me.
But Jerry, listen a minute. You mean that you can't stay away once a month? Let us come once a month and see you.
I mean, in walked this one old dude with green teeth, and I couldn't think of nothing to do, so I just reached out and kicked old green teeth right in the knee.
Your mom asked you a
Yeah.
question.
Jerry,
If I'm not scared, I won't
Jerry,
kill
it's
you.
important that you listen to me for a minute.
Why, you gonna tell
If
me
you go back,
Dad's dead?
if you go back, no, if you go back,
You gonna tell me Snoopy's dead?
you had better listen. Don't think of something else while I'm talking to you. Listen to what
I'm
I'm
not
saying.
talking to you at all.
Okay, if you go back, you may wind up in a hospital that I won't even get to come and see you once a month.
You are not my...
Do you understand me?
Do you realize this is my mother and I'm trying to keep her alive? Now, what do you recommend, doctor?
I recommend you give her a chance and listen to her.
Don't you think it would be better that you stay here on your own?
No.
Where you signed yourself in?
I don't.
Jerry, I think that you're
You don't
confused
know
enough about and frightened enough But I'd be afraid you would hurt yourself if you were in the hospital.
Okay, now, you are afraid that I would hurt myself if I wasn't in a hospital. Now, why is that? Because you're
Because of
not
what you
afraid?
said.
Because you're not afraid?
No, from what you said.
I think my dad can treat me very nicely.
Well, I understand that your dad wants you, knows that you have to be in the hospital for that.
I can't see why you can't stay and participate in it on good terms without...
Because I was raped going to kindergarten about 5 times.
Well, that was a few years
Okay,
ago.
let me give it to you a different way. How long has it been since I dreamed I was there in hillbilly heaven? Or how long has it been since Town Without Pity for rape? Or how long has it been since The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
My first impression of his family was the one I have in a lot of these cases, and that's that they're like a group of people that have been struck by lightning. Their son has developed a terrible illness, has been through lots of treatment, and has not gotten much better. And they feel devastated by it.
To me, it's like their mind is racing like a motor is racing continuously, and I really do, I believe it goes on that way, even when they're sleeping, because he carries on like this when he's awake, you know, like I said, talking and gets belligerent. Then he has nightmares when he does go to sleep. So I think his mind is really working the same while they're asleep. I think they're in totally, as he calls it, hell, while they're sleeping and awake. If one should say the word hell, because you don't know what it's really like. I know I have made the remark and thought about it a lot of times. I wouldn't have to die to go to it. But then I guess I have to keep telling myself nothing hasn't gotten so bad that it couldn't get worse. And I really and truly believe that. And if I didn't have that to think about, I think I would have done been off on the deep end myself. Because it's, sometimes when you go to work, you can't do your work because all you can think about is them.
What could cause such a terrible destruction of personality? If the mind is made by the brain, surely the schizophrenic brain must be damaged. 19th century psychiatrists collected the brains of former patients, but they could detect nothing unusual about them.
At the time that schizophrenia was first described, it was thought to be a disease of the brain, and that if the pathologists looked hard enough, they would find the lesions. That didn't happen, and people became discouraged with the biological approach. And then Sigmund Freud introduced a new dimension into psychiatry, the importance of early environment, the importance of interaction with parents. And the pendulum swung over, and the attitude about schizophrenia became one of parental dominance or parental interference. And a whole generation of parents of schizophrenics have somehow developed a considerable guilt feeling because someone has told them that they are responsible for the schizophrenia by virtue of how they reared their children.
Jerry was given good and loving care from the start, and his parents should have no reason for feeling guilty. Indeed, the illness hit them as hard as it hit Jerry himself.
This is the baby picture, the very first one we had made. He was 6 weeks old when that one was made. And then when this one here was made, we had moved to a different location, and at that point his allergies had started real bad. And I would say he was about 2.5 when that one was made. And here he has a bird. His uncle had bought him this bird because when he was a baby he couldn't have no pets. He wasn't supposed to have the bird, but they gave in and told him he could, and he was very proud of that. And this was another one with the same group of kids in the neighborhood, and his dad was teaching them all how to dance there by his record player. And this one here was made on a Sunday. We might have been getting ready to go to church, I don't remember, and decided they'd make the picture. He always had the clown with his face. And this one here, his uncle was visiting with us, and they were babysitting with this little girl, and he likes children, and then he decided that he'd gained too much weight, so he'd go on him a crash diet, and he did. And he went from looking like that to looking like this, which wasn't, to me, wasn't a healthy look. And then right after that was when he started going downhill, or what you would say, but that's when his sickness probably started coming to a head at that time. And this picture was made when he was on the police department. You can see, since Jerry's sickness has come out, I can see the sickness in Jerry's face, in his eyes. I can see it. It's in this picture as plain as the picture is green and black. And why they didn't see it or couldn't see it when they were examining him, I'll never know. What I'm trying to say is if they had picked it up then and he had never gotten on the police department, who knows, maybe he would not have gotten as bad as he has.
For the last 25 or 30 years, there's been increasingly compelling evidence that there is a strong genetic factor here. This does not mean that every parent who has or has had schizophrenia in his or her life is going to produce a schizophrenic child. It does suggest that the chances are somewhat greater.
In search of evidence for a genetic basis for schizophrenia, Seymour Ketty turned to the detailed medical records kept in Denmark. How could he distinguish the genetic influence inherited from the mother or father from the effect of a disturbed home? Schizophrenia certainly runs in families, but so, for example, does poverty. For the general population, the risk is 1%. If an immediate relative is schizophrenic, the risk factor rises to about 10%. For children of two schizophrenic parents, 40%. And for the identical twin of someone with the disease, the chance is 50%. But this still doesn't prove that there's a genetic basis. Twins obviously share a very similar early environment. How could Ketty try to pull apart inherited and environmental factors?
The thought occurred to my colleagues and to me that adoption offers such a means because an adopted person derives his genetic endowment from one family, but he shares his life experiences with another.
Ketty looked at a sample of adopted children who'd become schizophrenic. He traced all their biological relatives, including half-brothers and sisters. He also contacted their adoptive families. Among the whole group, he found 37 schizophrenics. When they were sorted into family groups, results were dramatic. About 14% of the biological relatives were found to be schizophrenic, compared with only 3% of the adoptive families. One family which certainly seems to carry the disease is Heather Starrin's.
What do you drink? What do you eat? Do you realize that I have a monopoly over the coffee industry? Okay, and so that's the problem, isn't it? That's the complaint, right? Well, I have kryptonite in me. You know what that is, don't you? Kryptonite?
Heather's extraordinary behavior may derive from a small error in the genes in her chromosomes. Recent work at the Middlesex Hospital pinpoints a defect on chromosome 5 in schizophrenics.
When I think I have an uncle, a cousin, a niece, a sister, a son, I don't want my healthy daughter to come to me 20 years from now and say, Mama, you're also a grandmother of a schizophrenic. I want to avoid that.
The discovery of a genetic marker for schizophrenia offers hope for Eleanor, because it may lead to a prenatal diagnostic test for susceptibility to the disease. Heather has just returned with her parents from a shopping trip. Soon they must take her back to hospital, whether she liked it or not.
You love raw eggs? Do you eat raw eggs? When I was pregnant, I think boys get pregnant and girls don't. Yeah, it's true. But I ate raw eggs, but, do you eat raw eggs? No, what do you eat and drink? Is that the big problem? You don't know what to keep you sane by? Is that a complaint? No? Okay.
My daughter now is in a state hospital. We, like most families, have run out of funds after years of seeking help in all the private facilities. And there certainly is a vast difference between the private facility and the state hospital. These are not hospitals. These are institutions, some of them very much like prisons. When it comes time to take her back to the hospital, she's, reluctant to go back. And then I say to myself, is it possible? Is it possible that I could keep her home?
Parnock shopping.
And then
Do you
I...
want to go Parnock shopping? Do you want to go Parnock shopping?
What kind of shopping, Heather?
Parnock shopping.
What is that?
What is that? You know what Parnock? How you sit all off?
Oh, Heather, is it a soap?
Huh? Is Parnock a soap? Parnock is a soap, yeah.
Oh, and you want to buy some?
Yeah.
Is it a special kind of a soap?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll stop on the way. You want to stop and get some? When we go back?
We're not going back.
Heather, we have to go back. You know that.
My turn.
Well, what
I do nothing. Believe me, I do nothing. Okay?
You mean you do nothing where, Heather?
Here, I do nothing. I don't care. I do nothing.
Well, Heather, we're going to have to go back. You know that.
I know.
Well, we don't have to go back right away.
But you're not rough with me. Wait till they come here with the straight jackets, okay?
No, Heather, they're not going to do that.
If they don't do that, then I don't have to go back. Mrs. Deloche and Mrs. Barnes told me in the morning that I am not welcome back. She said, we ain't coming after you. They said that.
Well, they shouldn't come after you. We're not going to have them come.
I do nothing, and that's what I want to do, nothing.
I know, Heather, but we do have to go back so that you can come here again and stay longer and stay overnight. You know that, Heather. We're going to have to leave, and then you'll come home again, Heather.
I'm not going to Washington.
Well, just waiting for the paperwork.
Did you ever have a complex? A president of the United States complex? That means you're retarded. You know, I'm retarded. You noticed that, didn't you? You noticed that, you know what I'm saying? I'm retarded. Right? I'm an idiot, a moron.
You're not, Heather. You're none of those things, Heather. You're none
I'm
of
a
those
boss.
things.
I'm a boss. I'm an orderer, a dictator, you know?
You're not retarded, Heather.
Could you buy Parnock on the way? We have to go back to Manhattan today? Where do you live in Manhattan?
Central Park West.
Central Park. Near the St. Moritz?
Yeah.
Yeah? Did you ever wear a dress?
For centuries, people have searched for a cause and a cure for madness. In medieval times, the disease was attributed to possession by evil spirits or overabundant body fluids, and crude attempts were made to release them. The insane were subjected to bloodletting or regular vomiting. They were cruelly chained or brutally treated to constrain or torture the devils that possessed them. In desperation, 19th century doctors tried to shake or shock their patients back to sanity. The simplest remedies were often the most effective. A cold bath or shower would calm even the most difficult patients, and restraining baths like this were still in use right up to the 1950s. Arnie Scheibel remembers this period.
It's very difficult to describe to you the sense of frustration and sadness, often of anger, at having a ward or a hospital wing full of patients who were often unapproachable, severely confused, and untreatable. I can remember very clearly helping put patients into restraining baths, where they're put into a bathtub of cool water, and then a canvas top is put over them to make them stay there, simply because this kind of bath did indeed have a sedative effect. Just before the so-called drug revolution, I had a ward of patients, and I was just beginning to do research downstairs. I went away for a year to Europe on a Guggenheim fellowship, and when I got back, the drugs had been, out of nowhere, introduced from France into this country. And there was a sense of disbelief that we could actually do something substantive for the patients. And as I say, see them for the first time as sick individuals, not as something bizarre that we literally could not talk to.
The crucial discovery was made at the Hôpital Boucicaut in Paris by a general surgeon, Henri Laborie, who was trying out new drugs in the hope of reducing post-operative shock after normal surgery.
Parce que, finalement, un malade...
Before a patient's operated on, he's not very calm, you know. He's well aware of the risks involved, even more so in those days, when anesthetics were very touch and go, very rudimentary. 8 days before the operation, already the anxiety is building. He's laying the groundwork for his post-surgical illness well in advance of the operation. With these new drugs, the phenothiazines, I was getting a profound psychic and physical relaxation, a real indifference to the environment and to the operation. It seemed to me these drugs must have an application in psychiatry.
Psychiatrist Pierre Deniquet, dealing with the severely mentally ill, heard of Laborie's success with the new phenothiazine drugs and decided that they might help his worst patients.
This kind of hard madness confronted us with the real core of insanity. So we were involved with any drug we thought might be useful. We tried a number of compounds, including Laborie's famous lytic cocktail. And at that point, very quickly, we saw the restlessness of the patients begin to level off. We saw them going calmer and calmer, and sleep began to return. In those days, insomnia was a problem which is hard to believe now. Patients could go without sleep for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. So we saw sleep coming back. And the orderlies, who had all the skepticism of old-timers about our experiments, came up to us at that point and said, "This time you've really got something."
Since then, anti-schizophrenic drugs have made restraining baths and padded cells a thing of the past for most patients. For Valerie Robinson, they've restored her sanity.
And put to bed.
Valerie is still haunted by some of those bizarre treatments, but thanks to the drugs, she's now quite sane. What do you remember, Valerie, about the beginning of the illness?
Well, it's strange, really, because I didn't know I was ill. I was very happy at the time. I was at a teacher training college. I'd always wanted to teach. I was enjoying my studies. And I had a religious conversion experience, which was very, very meaningful to me. And I was very happy for about 6 months. And then after a while, strange things started to happen. Well, I look back now and think they were strange. At the time, I didn't. First thing was I heard God calling to me. was standing by my window and I heard his voice. And he kept repeating my name. And I immediately thought of Joan of Arc. And I began to believe that I was the second Joan of Arc. And that God had a very special mission for me to perform. Alongside this, I believed that God had given me lots of special gifts. One of them was a special vision. Everything I looked at was lit up. It was fantastic. Roses were brilliant red and brilliant yellow. Grass was green. You could see every little blade separately.
Did other people wonder what was going on?
I don't think so. I didn't tell them. Because alongside this, there were other things happening, you see. I thought I had this special gift and I had this special mission to perform, but I also thought that other people wanted to take this away from me. And I began to get terribly suspicious of my friends, and I began to withdraw from my friends. And I stopped going to lectures, and I stopped going to social activities. And I really believed that other people were against me. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night very, very frightened. There was this terrible atmosphere all around me. It was like evil in the room. And I started hearing voices in the room. Not God's voice, which I'd heard before, and which I liked hearing. These were other voices. These were vicious voices. These were voices which were saying I was a terrible person, which were saying I was a murderer, and I had obscene ideas, and it was quite horrific. After that, the next few days, I'm not quite sure what happened.
So someone must have found you and then you were taken to hospital?
Yes, I do remember being in the college medical room and a psychiatrist being there. And he was telling me that I was having a very serious breakdown and must go into hospital straight away. Over the next 5 years, I think I spent at least one episode in hospital each year. Not so long, they lasted about 3 months a time.
The phenothiazines were discovered by chance. Valerie now lives a normal life thanks to much improved anti-schizophrenic drugs. But to set about improving those early tranquilizers, scientists had to understand how they act in the brain. The clue came from amphetamine addicts. They had bizarre hallucinations just like schizophrenic patients. Amphetamine seemed to produce madness. When rats were given this drug, they became hyperactive. In Sweden, researchers realized that this behavior might help them understand how anti-schizophrenic drugs work.
When the amphetamine addicts first were seen and were admitted into the hospital, you noticed very weird things, like they would have repetitive movements, but they would be much more complicated than the kind of movements you see in a rat.
Amphetamine addicts repeat actions for hours on end. Schizophrenic patients do similar things. The Swedish scientists used the strange repetitive movements induced by amphetamine to help them trace the source of schizophrenia. If there's a link between schizophrenia in humans and the abnormal movements of an amphetamine-treated rat, an anti-schizophrenic drug should restore such rats to normal. The experiment worked. So now they had a way to test new drugs. But what was the amphetamine doing? They monitored the changes in the brain of an anesthetized rat after it had been given amphetamine. The brain began to release large quantities of a substance called dopamine. But where was it coming from? By using stains that showed dopamine-containing cells as green, they were able to pinpoint a set of special nerves deep inside the brain. They followed the fibers of these cells through the rat's brain. From the base of the brain, the dopamine neurons fan out in 2 groups. One group goes to regions that control movement. But a second group reaches areas of the brain that are involved in perceiving and understanding the world. Could this be where the fault lies in schizophrenia? Nerve cells communicate with each other via junctions called synapses. When an impulse arrives here, chemicals such as dopamine are released that act on receptor molecules to switch the next cell on or off. Amphetamine makes neurons release too much dopamine. But anti-schizophrenic drugs block the receptors. So perhaps the brains of schizophrenic patients have overactive dopamine synapses. These slices, taken after death from the brains of schizophrenics, have unusually large numbers of dopamine receptors, a change that would make the brain too sensitive to normal levels of dopamine. The new drugs that have helped Valerie have been specifically designed to block those extra receptors. Far from possession by devils, madness may be a chemical imbalance in the brain.
And what about now? Are you optimistic about the future, or are you worried about the possibility of another episode?
Well, that's difficult to say. I still take a small amount of medication every day. I have tried to go without medication on certain occasions for shorter or longer periods, but each time I've had to come back. And I'm happy now to stay on medication, providing I'm in control of it.
In 1981, Valerie was at last able to resume her studies, and she now has a degree. Although drugs have restored Valerie's sanity, some people like Jerry don't respond to them. Tim Crow at Northwick Park Hospital is trying to find out why.
We've gone back to the question of structural changes in the brain. Are there really changes in the brain that you can relate to the disease process? We looked first with computerized tomography, CT scan, and we looked particularly at the question of enlargement of the ventricles. These are the fluid-filled cavities in the brain. And we know that in many neurodegenerative diseases, what you see when you see loss of brain substance is a degree of enlargement of these fluid-filled cavities.
In the normal brain, the fluid-filled ventricles appear as narrow tubes. But in many chronic schizophrenics, they're enlarged, implying that brain tissue around them has degenerated. Recently, Tim Crow has discovered, especially on the left side of the brain, that one part of the network of ventricles inside the temporal lobe is particularly enlarged.
If you think then that there are degenerative changes here in the temporal lobe in schizophrenia, or at least in some schizophrenics, what's so important about the temporal lobe?
The interest of the temporal lobe is that it seems to be a way station for all sorts of incoming sensory information, for example, from the visual areas here, from the auditory areas here, from smell and so forth. All of these pathways come into the temporal lobe. It sort of integrates together sensation and feeds into structures on the medial side of the lobe here, the hippocampus, for example, which seems to be concerned with memory, with integrating our sensations, with motivation, emotion, and so forth. So a very important area.
In the last 10 years, we've concerned ourselves primarily with the hippocampus. This is a part of the cerebral hemispheres deep within the cortex, which of course is on the outside. The hippocampus is an older part of the brain located in a gentle arc deep within the brain that is very much concerned with the ways we feel and the ways we relate to the world around us. Essentially what we have here are two photographs, one of the hippocampus from a normal brain, apparently an individual who never had any mental disease during life. And we have another that's photographed, obviously, section of a patient who was schizophrenic for most of his life. What we see essentially is an ensemble of nerve cells which in the normal individual are lined up like little soldiers next to each other. And in the schizophrenic patient, they're like soldiers who have a discipline problem in many different orientations. In patients such as these, where the cells are, and their processes, we call them dendrites, the processes are so much awry, we think that the connections are quite different. They vary from person to person, and they also vary from cell to cell. So that, in a sense, and this is, at this point, hypothesis more than fact, essentially the person must experience the world quite differently than the way the non-schizophrenic person does.
The interesting thing is that the normal human brain is an asymmetrical structure, and it seems that it's asymmetrical particularly in this region of the temporal lobe. There are parts of the upper region of the temporal lobe that are larger on the left side in the human brain than on the right side, and this no doubt has a lot to do with the human capacity for speech and communication. Now, it's of particular interest that in schizophrenia, we find that these changes in the temporal horn, the enlargement of the temporal horn, is particularly on the left side. And that suggests to us that there's some connection between schizophrenia and the asymmetries of function in the normal human brain.
Optimistic doctors and politicians anxious to save money once thought that the new drugs would make mental hospitals unnecessary. But illness like Jerry's may never be cured.
I don't want to be confined to any institution. If you've never been put away by yourself in a place that you're scared and you're terrorized and everything else, Lord have mercy, you don't know where you've been, but that's my father's home, and he worked, and that's clean money. He worked 31 years at Chrysler's, doing 300-pound deadlifts, 3 a second for 31 years. And it's clean money, and I don't know. Are the cops gonna kill me, man, for quitting? Is somebody gonna kill me?
Until we know how to prevent the decay that causes chronic schizophrenia, his future looks bleak. Jerry is out of hospital, but only for a day.
How long did you give your pace for?
Till 6 tonight. Are you gonna kill me?
No, I got no intention to do nothing to you, Joe.
See, I still have this male aggression thing, and I don't know if you're gonna kill me, and I don't care. Enough's enough.
Well, what makes you think your daddy would kill you?
Because we were getting 20 gunshots a night, and I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. I went out there and found out everybody was shooting everybody. There was a lot of stress in that city. In Detroit, as far as stopping the crime, if you want to stop the crime, you better talk to John Nichols, because he knew what he was doing. Daddy, you know how you feel? Well, I feel even worse than that. That man, if I wanted him to and said, get up and go to the bedroom and leave me alone, would do it. He is a father complex, but he's not a wishy-washy father complex. He's 68 years old, and he can still kick my ass, even though I can do squats with 2,000 pounds. I don't have any fun at all. The police department was fun.
Well, there's a lot of fun out
Yeah, there ain't no fun out there killing people, no.
Well, no, I ain't for nobody.
I've got a certain amount of common sense, too. I am precedent and morals, and whether you believe it or not, you've taught me a lot. But somewhere you lost your love capacity.
Why'd you want to talk that?
I'm scared of you. Who do I go to? Where do I go?
What have I ever done to you?
Nothing that you knew you were doing. Except I've always known what I was doing. Dr. Petrelli said, Gerald, there's nothing wrong with you. You are so sane, you're insane. I don't have no fun. Ever. You worked 30 years at Chrysler's. Well, hell, I got 15 years seniority there. What are you talking about? I don't have no fun at all.
It's awful bad when you only got one kid, too, because you think of what we done. We worked, both of us worked hard and saved and tried to have something for Gerald, you know, so he wouldn't have to work hard, you know, to give him a good start in life and everything, try to put him through college and do without things that maybe we should have bought, but saved it for him. didn't want him to work like we was raised on the farm, you see. And I didn't want him to work hard. We loved the boy, and we done everything we could for him. Still do. But as far as having any hope, I don't know.
If this film has given you a feeling for the cruelty of insanity, it will have served its purpose. Schizophrenia strikes young adults at the start of their independent lives and robs them of their humanity. True, roughly 1/3 of all schizophrenics do seem to respond quite well to therapy, and they can be brought back at least to the edges of the world of the sane with antipsychotic drugs and with a lot of support from the people around them. And another third seem to get better after just 1 or 2 episodes, whether they're treated or not. But let's not forget the final third, who don't respond well to therapy and who remain desperately ill for the rest of their lives. For them, the scientific revolution in our understanding of this terrible illness has yet to come.
If you'd like more information on organisations that can provide help on schizophrenia, please send a stamped addressed envelope to The Mind Machine, Schizophrenia, BBC Television, London W12.
I was back for about 2 weeks, and then I found that I couldn't sleep.